Podcast. Real conversations with the people behind Bristol's businesses.
So welcome back to the Bristol Business Podcast, the show that celebrates the people and the organisations making a difference in our amazing city. Today's guest is someone whose work touches the lives in a quiet but incredibly powerful way. I'm joined by Tara Fisher, Chief Operating Officer of Marmalade Trust, the UK's leading loneliness charity, and that's based right here in Bristol. Marmalade Trust is on a mission to not only support those experiencing loneliness, but also shift the way we as a society understand and talk about it. From their Christmas Day events to the national recognised Loneliness Awareness Week, their impact is far-reaching. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how the charity operates behind the scenes, Tara's role in leading the strategy and partnerships, and how local businesses can play a vital part in their mission. So, hello Tara, how are we doing today?
Hi Lee, I'm really well, thank you, and thanks so much for having me on the podcast.
Awesome. So just before we get into it, so can you just give me a brief history of the story behind the charity and your role in it?
Yeah, of course. So the charity was founded in 2013 by our wonderful CEO and founder, Amy Perrin. So Amy had a background, she was working as an occupational health therapist and saw the impact of loneliness that it can have on people on a pretty much daily basis in terms of their health, well-being and physical and mental health as well. Amy also volunteered and was taking 3 older people that were going to be on their own out for lunch on Christmas Day, because Amy was also going to be on her own on Christmas Day. That quickly escalated through GP surgeries contacting her, even a bank clerk contacting her to say, do you have space? Could you take any more people? And I think she ended up with 18 people going out for lunch on Christmas Day. She recognised that Christmas was a real catalyst for people experiencing loneliness and could be a catalyst for change. Her doormat got, a big pile of thank you cards, and at that point she realised that actually there's something here, and that's really where Marmalade Trust started. So I joined Marmalade Trust in January this year as their Chief Operating Officer. And I have to say it's an amazing organisation, and it's an utter privilege to, support them in the work that they're doing.
It just hits you there, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because it's something that I talk quite a lot about. So I work within the care sector, so I do software for the care sector, so I've really kind of got into that care kind of background, and I do a lot of work on mental health, and some of the things that I talk about is we're in this like super connected world, but at the same time we've never been more lonely than we are now. Yeah. And I do a lot of trustee works for care charities working in care homes, and we just see some people there that just they might be in Bristol but their family are in London, for instance, and the loneliness is a real killer. And I think one of the things you said there, which hits hard so many people, is Christmas. Yeah. Christmas is this amazing time full of like all the lights on, decorations, there's presents, we get time off with our family. But what we don't think about is those people who are kind of not lucky enough to have a good Christmas.
Yeah.
And there's almost this pressure on us to enjoy Christmas, but it can also be this time of crippling loneliness. I mean, outside of the fact that the financial pressures are ridiculous. So,
I think that Christmas piece is really interesting, isn't it? Because there are, of course, some people that are really happy to be alone and to be on their own on Christmas Day. And, I think that recognition that being alone and being lonely are 2 very different things, because even people who have families, who have a big network, who might be surrounded by people on Christmas Day, could still be and will still be experiencing loneliness. Those people are there as well.
Yeah, it's very kind of, it's a multifaceted kind of subject, isn't it? And I noticed when I was kind of like having a look at Marmalade Trust, one thing that I did come across was the Loneliness Awareness Week. So can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, so Loneliness Awareness Week was founded in 2017, and part of what the Marmalade Trust recognised was that actually loneliness is quite hidden by its very nature, right? So it's quite hidden, and that we felt we had a responsibility to raise awareness. And so Loneliness Awareness Week started. So it's grown from a grassroots campaign to actually now a global Loneliness Awareness Week. So it takes place each year. This year it's running the 9th to the 15th of June, so we're only a couple of weeks out. And it has two parts to it. So we have the raising awareness part. So we have a digital campaign, which we will run across all social media and PR, TV interviews, radio interviews, podcasts, where we are raising awareness of loneliness. And we are following a theory of change, behaviour change model. So each year, Loneliness Awareness Week has a theme. So our theme this year is reducing stigma. And our campaign IDEN is meeting loneliness together. And then we have that part of it, and then we have our, we call them activations, but essentially our events. So we have our Loneliness Awareness Week website and connections map, which is a user-led interactive map where anybody that's doing something during Loneliness Awareness Week can add that to the map. And if someone wants to think about, well, I'm feeling lonely today, what can I do? They can go on and search to see what's happening and go along and join an event. And there's a massive range of things on there from, we have a lady in Essex who's going to be doing a walk and talk dog walk, and just is going to, advertise that, and then a group of people will go along and walk and talk. Through to businesses that are putting loneliness on their agenda. So, for example, Medway Council will be having loneliness as part of their team meeting agenda that week, so they can raise awareness and talk about it and ensure that people within their business are having the opportunity to discuss how connected they're feeling. Through to, the libraries that will have Loneliness Awareness Week resources that people can go in and use. So it's a kind of two-faceted campaign, and something that we're incredibly proud of.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. So how can people get involved with Loneliness Awareness Week?
So there are lots of ways to get involved. From the business perspective, we're having actually a Loneliness Awareness Week business panel, on the 9th of June at the Tobacco Factory. So their tickets are available on Eventbrite, so people businesses can go and book to that. We've got some really inspirational speakers, and there's going to be an opportunity to network. So that's a great way for local Bristol businesses to get involved. On an individual basis, people can, do an event and put it onto Loneliness Awareness Week map. That's a fantastic way to get involved. And as I said, I've spoke about some of the examples there of what people can do. A couple of years ago, we had a young gentleman contact us who was experiencing loneliness, didn't quite know what to do, knew it was Loneliness Awareness Week, but wanted to do something. So we had a chat with him, and he really liked art, so he decided that he was going to just put some posters up locally to say that he was going to go to the local park and would be doing some art if anybody wanted to join him. He had 19 people go, and that group still meets. So there's lots of ways to get involved, and we have lots of resources on the website that people can download and look at for ideas in terms of what they could be doing. They, of course, can also volunteer with Marmalade Trust. We're always looking to bring volunteers into our organisation to support us with projects and with the, work-based volunteering, for example.
Talked about the stigma there a little bit. Would you say there's more of a stigma around loneliness in the younger people? Because I think as a society, we almost expect the older generation to, when the families move out and they go move somewhere else for work, or don't necessarily have all the time to spend with your mum or your nan or people like that. But the example you just give with a young chap, you say there's more stigma around the younger people?
I mean,
with
I think that
loneliness?
there's stigma across the board. It's a really interesting question because actually what we know currently is that the largest demographic of people that are experiencing loneliness are 16 to 25-year-olds. So, you spoke at the start about, we're living in a really connected time, and particularly in terms of social media, but people are the loneliest they've ever felt. And that's because, we recognise and we understand that loneliness is a natural human emotion. And as such, we're all very likely to experience it at some point in our lifetime. And it's our brain's way of telling us that, the connection that we're having is not really meeting our needs. So whilst, younger people may be very connected online and will, spend lots of time on their phone, that's not meeting their real need in terms of that social, meaningful connection. We do know that loneliness, if left unchecked, can develop into enduring loneliness. Some people will call that chronic loneliness. We know the devastating impact that has on health and on your mortality. And of course, that loneliness exists in particularly prevalent in those older groups. But as I said at the start of the question, the largest demographic are 16 to 25-year-olds. But our understanding is that actually that stigma is felt by everybody. And that's part of the mission of Loneliness Awareness Week, is that, for people to understand that it's a natural human emotion, to recognise that there's nothing wrong with that, because, if you're feeling happy, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're feeling sad, there's nothing wrong with that. And this is no different. We have a 3-step approach that we deliver through our loneliness awareness training, which is, that really talks about that, recognising what you're feeling is loneliness, understanding what you need to meet that social connection need. So, I often equate it to being hungry. Like if I was hungry, I might choose to have a ham sandwich. That's going to meet my need. If you're hungry, you may be vegetarian. You would never have a ham sandwich. You might have peanut butter sandwich.
Yeah.
2 different things, but that's meeting your need. And then thirdly, to take the step, so to take that action, and that's going to look different for everybody. So whether that's, reaching out and speaking to a colleague or a member of your family or a friend to say, I'm lonely, I need some help, or whether that's accessing resources through, example through our charity, but taking that step to do something to address your loneliness. And what we want, and this is part of that behaviour change model that we apply to Loneliness Awareness Week, is when somebody says I'm lonely, we want them to be met with kindness and compassion and support. And, and I think some of that stigma and some of that fear comes from people feeling like, well, there must be something wrong with me if I'm feeling lonely, and being worried about, having a response of, well, how can you be lonely? Because you've got lots of friends, or you go to work every day and you see people. But actually, we know that you can experience loneliness at any time. Doesn't matter, we have examples of people that have been in Glastonbury, surrounded by hundreds of thousands of people and feeling really lonely. So, so that's, part of what we're trying to achieve with Law is that response is kindness, compassion and support.
So do we find, again, we talked about the demographics, do we find any kind of other sort of demographics outside the age? So is it more people who might struggle with anxiety that will kind of be more lonely, or is it kind of across the board?
There's certainly demographics that seem to be impacted more than others. So, for example, and lots of it, there's different types of loneliness, isn't there? You have emotional loneliness, situational loneliness, transitional loneliness, when going through times of change. But we know that, loneliness is prevalent in mums. Mums will lose their social network in terms of, coming out of work. Particularly younger mums and single mums as well, because they, that support network isn't necessarily there. We know that it is an issue for men, particularly men over 50, and that does lead into that mental health approach, doesn't it? Because, like I said earlier, that loneliness, if we're not addressing that, that can develop into, enduring persistent loneliness that then can impact on mental health, on physical health. It can increase anxiety. you will find, a higher level of loneliness amongst people with disabilities because of, often the nature of their disability makes it more difficult for them to engage in society in a way that's meeting their social connection needs. So it's interesting because it's a human emotion. It impacts across all groups, but certainly there are some demographics that do experience higher levels.
So obviously we've seen a big shift over COVID and things like that to remote working. Now there's massive benefits to that. So the company I work for, their head office is in Ireland. I work from the West Country. Can have lots of meetings, do lots of stuff. There's definitely benefits to working at home, but has that not being in the office, has that impacted loneliness as well?
I mean, that's definitely impacted loneliness as well. And I think, some of the things that we know is that there are people that, we all experienced isolation in some way during COVID, didn't we? We all went into lockdown. We were only, at some points not allowed to go outside of our front door for more than 10 minutes at a time, or I can't remember exactly what it was, but, we were living in bubbles. And for some people, they've never re-engaged back into society. So that, COVID has really impacted that way. But also in terms of the way we work, it's fundamentally changed the landscape of how we work. And that has impacted in terms of that social connection that we get through being in a workplace. And, we are seeing now, I'm sure you've seen it yourself on LinkedIn, that drive for businesses to bring people back into the office. And I think that, businesses need to think about how they do that and to do that in the right way so that people are feeling supported in that process. And that actually when it's not just about being in the office, it's about creating opportunity for people to connect during their time in the office in a meaningful way, other than we need to have a meeting to discuss the strategy about how many apples we're going to sell.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is, we need to create opportunity in workplaces for that meaningful connection. And some of that even goes down to the layout of the office. Is there space where people can stand and have a chat and connect? Are we building that time into the day? And also for people to feel like they can still balance with the life that they created from working fully remotely, because there's a whole network of support, particularly for people with caring responsibilities that they have to then put into place to go back into work. So it's a lot for business to think about. But, at Marmalade Trust, we work in a very hybrid way. So we have a day where everyone comes into the office. And one of the things we do is we have a fortnightly lunch and chat and connect time, so that we carve out time specifically where we can just sit around and have a chat. Sometimes work stuff comes up, sometimes it doesn't, but it's just creating space for people to be able to do that.
Just want to move on to kind of your roles as a chief operating officer with Marmalade. So what is your kind of day-to-day roles, responsibilities, stuff like that?
So my role is multifaceted, as you would imagine, being the Chief Operating Officer. So I have overall responsibility for the operational delivery of all of our projects, for project development, along with the Amy, our CEO, and then strategically managing our partnership relationships, the support in terms of organising Loneliness Awareness Week. I mean, at the moment, my time is pretty much taken up with Loneliness Awareness Week because we're 2.5 weeks out. Overseeing our fundraising strategy and our partnership strategy, making sure that we've got all of our processes, policies in place that are securing, strong foundations for the charity, looking at impact and evaluation of what we're doing. So covers a whole range of things, as well as the kind of day-to-day, business management and people management that come with that level of role.
Yeah, it must be really full on at the minute, getting ready for Loneliness Awareness Week.
It is.
It must be crazy.
Yeah, no, but it's good. It's a good busy because it means that people are interested and want to engage and want to be involved. So it's, we take that as a real positive.
Yeah, no, definitely. And how is fundraising? Because I'm involved with a few charities myself as a trustee, and fundraising's always the most difficult part of it, isn't it? It's a constant job.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's always a challenge, and I think I'm sure you're experiencing it and would have seen it reported across the sector that it becomes increasingly more difficult, doesn't it? And funders really want to fund the exciting project delivery, and charities really need that core costs being funded. So we're really fortunate. We have a corporate partnership that helps us in terms of that kind of stability and growth that we want to achieve within the charity. We have an amazing fundraiser who does our grant and bid applications and so on. We just have about to bring in someone on a full-time basis to be supporting us in that. So yeah, always challenging, but we are quite unique in what we do and how we work. For example, our Marmalade Connections project, which is a completely volunteer-led project that follows a social prescribing model that supports people who are experiencing loneliness through to social connection by having a weekly telephone call with a Marmalade trained volunteer for up to 15 weeks. And we're really unique in that because we believe we're the only organisation that does that on a volunteer-led basis. So we have an interesting offer to funders. But yeah, I mean, it's a grind, isn't it, where you're having to constantly apply for funding.
Yeah. So what are the key strategic goals for Marmalade Trust over the next, say, 10 years?
Oh, wow, that is a big question. So the key strategic goals are to increase our reach and continue to raise awareness of loneliness through Loneliness Awareness Week and Global Loneliness Awareness Week. We are anticipating we will be reaching over 200 million people this year with the campaign, and we want to see that grow year on year. We are looking at project expansion so that we are going to be in a position where we can offer national coverage for the projects that we deliver, and of course we'll be looking at project development. But we're not. It would be nice that we didn't exist in 10 years' time because we would have been met what we needed to met in terms of that awareness and reduced stigma and people being supported when they say they're feeling lonely. But as we recognise loneliness as a natural human emotion, there's always going to be a need there for connection. So, as much as it would be nice not to be around in 10 years, we anticipate that we will be. And it's just about making sure that we're engaging with our service users in that co-design of project development so that we know that, as younger demographics are coming through, we need to think about how our projects can evolve, what can we do that's new, and that's part of our kind of long-term vision for the charity as well.
That stat is it must make you feel amazing. Touching the lives of 200 million people, improving that must be, it's huge, isn't it?
It is. It's phenomenal. I think, we're a relatively small charity. There's around 10 of us and most of us are not full-time. So in terms of what we're achieving, it's significant compared to the size of what we are. And it's so important, each person that understands that actually they're not broken, they don't need to be fixed. What they need is a form of connection that's going to be right for them. And if we can, through Loneliness Awareness Week, help someone feel that and raise awareness and give them the courage to reach out to make a connection, then, to be able to do that on scale is just phenomenal.
I think something you said before really resonated with me about the fact that you can be around people and be lonely.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that not a lot of people think of. You've got like friends, family around you, and why are you lonely? But it's kind of like in here, the loneliness, isn't it? It
is. It's a feeling. Yeah. So I think, people, when we talk about loneliness, there's that perception that, it's 92-year-old Betty who's living on her own because her husband's passed away and she didn't have any children. And of course those people exist, and that, is really sad because those people will often go months without speaking or weeks without speaking to anybody else, and those people will often get their connection through going to the GP surgery or going into the bank, and that's still not really meeting their individual need. But because it's a natural emotion, loneliness can affect anybody at any point. I've been, I'm happily married with lots and lots of children and still experience loneliness myself, and within that context. And some of that is driven by external factors. For me personally, I would in a previous role, I was going through a challenging time at work and felt very lonely and very isolated, even though I had a supportive husband and a supportive network around me, because they weren't experiencing what I was experiencing. That was making me feel very lonely. And I, having experienced loneliness as a child as well, recognised what it was, and was able to reach out to someone who did some coaching and mentoring with me, which really helped me in terms of that, understanding what I needed, being able to link me with people that had experienced what I was experiencing. So for me, that was incredibly powerful. But, from the outside, you would look and think, why is she feeling lonely? She's working, she's got, this family around her. But, it can happen to any of us because, as I said, we can't say it enough. It's a natural human emotion.
Yeah, it is. And it's like I say, we talk about chronic loneliness. It's the same with burnout, isn't it? If you don't address it, you kind of move on there. So all of these human needs, we need to address the core underlying issue as opposed to just sticking a band-aid on it.
Yeah, exactly. And that need for connection is inbuilt in our DNA. It goes right back to when we were, living in caves, because if we didn't have community and we weren't connected, we would never have survived as a human race, and that's really ingrained in our DNA. And, and you talk about that chronic loneliness, or, we will call it persistent or enduring loneliness, and the impact that can have. The research tells us that if left unaddressed, is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It will reduce your mortality by up to 26%. So it's, it costs the economy £32 billion a year. So loneliness is it's a social issue. It's a public health issue that actually, through Loneliness Awareness Week, which is why that's so important, that we're raising awareness of that we are, ensuring that people can understand, as I said earlier, that they're not broken, they don't need to be fixed, they need a form of connection, and that when they're reaching out for that, they're being met with kindness and compassion. That's going to support people to move out of that enduring loneliness into a more connected life for them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Something that I talk a lot about is it's about people need to talk more, and we know that. That's kind of well documented, but also I think we need to listen more. And I think because we're so British, and if someone's like, I'm lonely, the kind of first instinct a lot of people have is to say it'll be all right, or kind of some platitude. So again, I think just listening in the right way and responding in the right way so people feel valued, because
absolutely. And that's, one of the reasons behind our loneliness awareness, loneliness understanding training that we deliver. So we deliver that to businesses and corporate organisations, local councils, really to everybody. And that's a chargeable service for us. But what we do with that money is that we then fund our training into schools, community settings, third sector, who don't have the funds to pay for that training, because that, supporting people to understand what loneliness is, supporting people to recognise it in somebody else, or to be able to ask the right questions in the right way, or to be able to respond in the right way when someone expresses that they're lonely, will, our intention with that is that then makes people more confident to speak out when they are feeling that loneliness.
Awesome. And Marmalade Trust runs several programmes, like you mentioned earlier, Christmas Cheer and Loneliness Awareness Week. We've discussed a lot. Could you share how these initiatives have evolved over time and their impact on the community?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Marmalade Trust was started with a Christmas lunch. So that evolved from one Christmas lunch into now annual Christmas lunches that happen across Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucester every year. And that project works in a way, and again, it's volunteer-led, where people that are going to be on their own on Christmas Day and are experiencing loneliness and do not want to be on their own on Christmas Day, because, some people are happy to spend Christmas alone, that we will match them with a volunteer, and we will use community venues, pubs, restaurants, who will either give us a table or their whole venue, and that volunteer will collect them, bring them to the Christmas lunch, and meet with a group of people and have a lovely Christmas lunch. Now, that project has grown over the years. We are going to be expanding that out across the UK in a slightly different format, but it's evolving. But what we know, and the feedback that we get, is that those people that go to those lunches then continue to meet as a group. So actually, whilst that one day was a catalyst for them in terms of their experience in loneliness, and then coming out and having the courage to go and join in with something, they're now making groups of friends. So that, for us is phenomenal. Our Marmalade Connections project is, and I think I described it earlier in terms of that social prescribing model. And again, we've historically delivered that in Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucester, but we are expanding that out nationally this year. And that project evolved from, well, actually, we've supported somebody on Christmas Day. What do we do next? And so, there will be lots of people that come to us on Christmas Day that then come and join the Marmalade Connections project, so that they have that volunteer-trained, volunteer-led support to move them on to social connection that meets their needs. So those projects interlinked, and that's evolved over time. And, it's a great way for people to get involved in supporting the charity, but also what we find is that, there will be people in our volunteers who are experiencing loneliness themselves, and it's a way for them to make a connection through volunteering on the project. So it's really powerful.
Yeah, so a real win-win.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, we get letters of thanks, we get, cards saying thank you. We hear stories of people that, have gone on and joined a crochet group, for example, and have met a whole new group of friends. And then often some of those people will then say, actually, can I volunteer? Because now I want to give back, and what I've experienced and the support that I've had and what I've achieved, I want to be able to do that for somebody else. So it's a really hugely positive project.
Yeah, and that is the milk of human kindness, isn't it? I mean, I think as a society, we're too focused on the negatives with humans, and we know they hurt people, but when we focus on the good in people, and like you say, someone who's benefited from the service, wants to give back and volunteer, that's what we should be focusing on, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We were really lucky and really honoured to receive the King's Award for Voluntary Service, and we had that presented to us this year by the King's representative for Bristol, and we held a tea party where we invited our project members and volunteers to come along as part of that. And, the feedback that we got from them on that day, and the recognition that they personally felt in the charity receiving that award, it made them incredibly proud. And, for us, it was a really special day.
Awesome. And are there any, we talked about partnerships, but are there any partnerships that have really kind of spread the awareness, the public awareness of Marmalade Trust?
Yeah, so we have, as I mentioned, we have a corporate partner. So our corporate partner is Heineken. So they do great work for us in terms of amplifying the Marmalade Trust message and what we're trying to do in terms of raising awareness for Loneliness Awareness Week. But we also have lots of local partnerships, across Bristol, with a whole variety of organisations. We work really closely with GP surgeries because, they will identify people that are experiencing loneliness and refer them to us for support via either Christmas Cheer or Marmalade Connections. We work with the Women's Work Lab. They're a fantastic organisation. I could go on naming loads and loads of them, but, it's fundamental to how we work is to work collaboratively and to work through partnership organisations, because the impact on loneliness, as I said earlier, it can impact anybody at any time, and we're all likely to experience it. So to have those really strong community partnerships is so important to us.
Awesome. And just moving on personally a little bit, so what inspired you to join Marmalade, and what keeps you motivated?
I mean, it's a really good question. So, I was working at a different charity, and had achieved a lot with them, and felt that it was time for me to look for something else. And having experienced loneliness myself, and knowing what that felt like, when I saw the advert for Marmalade Trust, and I did a bit of, as you do a little bit of a Google search, I was blown away with what they are doing, and I just was like, I have to be part of this organisation, because I know what it felt like for me when I was experiencing loneliness, and to be able to be part of an organisation that supported people with that, it just resonated very deeply with me. So I applied, and was luckily fortunate enough to be offered the position. And really what inspires me every day is just seeing the impact of the work we do on the people that are experiencing loneliness. You know, we have a phenomenal team of really, really dedicated people that work at the charity, but then also, you know, a whole army of volunteers that freely give their time to help us in our mission in terms of supporting people and raising awareness. But when you hear those stories, you know, and I spoke about that, you know, the young lad who did his artwork in the park, and how that's changed his life. When, you know, we have people that have been project members that have experienced, you know, really high levels of loneliness through bereavement of a partner, and how actually the project has supported them to build a whole new social network, and how that has really changed their life and improved their health. And, you know, the gratitude that they have for the support that's been given, it is truly, and it's an inspiring place to be every day. So yeah, I feel honoured to be working there.
Awesome. I love that so much. And just finally, because believe it or not, we're running out of time.
Oh, wow.
It seems to have flew by a rate of knots. But what advice would you give to other organisations aiming to tackle isolation in their communities?
I think the first piece of advice that I would offer would be to go out there and talk to people, to be open in terms of listening to what people tell you they need, to look also inwards as well. So how are you addressing this within your business, within your setting? So as I said, you know, some of the examples I used before, having loneliness as an agenda on your team meeting, creating space within your physical building and kind of office layout for people to be able to connect, creating connection spaces, creating connection activities. I mean, one of the things that we know in terms of that, you know, those hard stats, is that loneliness costs employers £5.2 billion a year. So a connected workforce is a happy workforce, and it's going to save you money. But also in terms of, you know, that outward facing piece is to work collaboratively, to speak to people, and to, you know, if you're looking at designing projects, then, you know, co-design that within the communities that you're looking to work in, because that's, you know, where you are going to make real impact, because you're going to deliver something that a community really needs.
Awesome. And any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts, absolutely. I would say that Loneliness Awareness Week is coming up, 9th to the 15th of June. I'd like to encourage all of the businesses in Bristol to do something for Loneliness Awareness Week. And even if that is as simple as having it on your team agenda, even if it is as simple as having a cake sale, if you wanted to do that and raise funds for Marmalade Trust, of course, that would be amazing. But if that's prohibitive for you, then just do it as a way for people to connect and chat. I'd encourage everyone in those businesses in Bristol to come along to our panel event on the 9th. As I said earlier, they can get tickets via Eventbrite. And if they have any problems, then please just reach out to us. And anything that they do during Loneliness Awareness Week, please put it on our Loneliness Connections map, which is www.lonelinessawarenessweek.org, and there's a link that takes you right through to the map. And if you need any help at all with that, reach out to us and we can support you.
Awesome. Well, a huge thank you for joining us, for sharing your inspiring work happening at Marmalade Trust. It's a powerful reminder that loneliness isn't just a personal feeling, it's a public issue and one that we all have a role in addressing. If you'd like to learn more about the charity, volunteer or explore how your business can support their hard work, head over to marmaladetrust.org. And as always, if you've enjoyed this episode, please follow, subscribe, leave us a quick review and share it with someone who'd love to learn more about Bristol's changemakers. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back soon.
Thanks for joining us on the Bristol Business Podcast. Please remember to leave a like, comment and subscribe. If you are interested in appearing or sponsoring the podcast, contact details can be found in the episode description.